Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Hello and welcome back to KRA's The Hub. This is Doug Foresta. Of course, I'm here with Jonathan Overall, but also with us today, our guest is Dawn Karber. She is the founder of Talent Growth Group and director of Skills Forward. Dawn, welcome. Jonathan, always pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, Doug.
It's always great to be with you, Doug and Dawn. Thank you for joining us today on the Hub podcast. So as we jump in today, can you give us a little bit of background about your work history and what led you to found the Talent Growth Group?
Sure. So workforce career professional. I, like many of us in the field, stumbled into workforce development, but very early. I'm from a tiny town in Idaho where everyone knows everybody. And at 16, I was making resumes for people and wanted them to use those resumes to apply at the local burger shack. So I've been doing workforce development without even realizing what workforce development was my entire sort of life. From there, I ended up at a Goodwill working on mentoring children of incarcerated parents and WIOA, right when WIOA was implemented, and then to a local workforce board for 17 years. And I was the chief operations officer for the past 12. And I had kind of done everything I could do for the workforce system. I'm in Spokane, Washington. And if I implemented any more changes, I think there was going to be a bounty for me. So people were not interested in continuing to change. And it's not for change's sake, but I am an innovator at heart, and I really wanted to work on the future of work. I left after 17 amazing years and founded Talent Growth Group, a consulting firm, and was pretty immediately offered a position at Skills Forward, which is a division within the Rockefeller Philanthropic Advisors team. And we're working on skill-based hiring and learning and employment records.
Thank you so much. So Dawn, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last couple of months, actually, and through producing other podcasts that you've been on. And so I know that you have a passion for bringing innovation into workforce development. Talk a little bit about how do you create a culture within workforce organizations that embraces innovation?
Yeah, so that's amazing and challenging at the same time. So to create a culture of innovation, first and foremost, you can't stifle it by being afraid of failure, being afraid of little mistakes. And when you sort of merge that with workforce development, particularly at the workforce development board level, it's quite the challenge, right? So you have monitors and auditors, and they want everything to be perfect. And that's great. And yet, to move forward innovation, you have to be comfortable with things not going perfectly. So I love the intersection between human-centered design, innovation, and workforce boards for that reason. I love to be able to help workforce boards challenge their assumptions with what can be perfect to maybe have a blurred line for perfection. And also, people think that WIOA is more prescriptive than it really is. So there's a lot of flexibility within WIOA. I love WIOA. I love it. I love that there's so much gray. And yet people tend to not try to look for the gray. They look to the law and say, that's all we can do. And I have some pretty good friends at Department of Labor, either currently or in the past. And they really have been clear. You don't need to look to the WIOA law for only what you can do. You can do everything that's not included that it says you can't, right? So there's a lot of room for flexibility and innovation. And I love pushing on workforce boards and workforce systems to find that innovation.
Good. Now, Dawn, I know in the work that you do that there is a focus on partnership development between organizations. If you could tell us, how can building strong partnerships really help drive innovation in the workforce development space, and what advice would you have for organizations in that area?
Oh, it's so much the same as the past answer. Not too prescriptive. Look for the gray. And then I also say forgiveness. So any of us that have worked in workforce systems, you've worked with partners that they've made you unhappy. And maybe the partnership didn't go well, or the person that you were working with was challenging, or you found their personality challenging. And I've seen a lot of workforce boards give up and go, oh, there's nothing we can do. The person's too difficult. The agency's too difficult. And I don't believe that. I think that you just haven't found the win-win for both organizations. And I know there's some tough people out there, but even the toughest partners are in it to win, to be successful, or they would not be in workforce development. It is not for the faint of heart, right? So it is really finding the win-win, negotiating, trying to build trust, but also showing up with a forgiving attitude. I have been accused of being the person that will run repeatedly into a brick wall over and over and over again without stopping. And there's some truth to that when it comes to partnerships and forgiveness, because I think that when we work together, particularly with those with varying backgrounds or differences of perspective, that's when you get innovation. If you are willing to not take the first answer that you find, see, you're in a group of people and someone says, hey, here's this challenge. How do we solve it? Someone else gives a suggestion. If you take the first suggestion, you are not leading an innovative culture. If you wait for others to throw out other suggestions, particularly those that you find challenging or that ruffle your feathers sort of immediately, if you're able to pause and let the discussion, let the brainstorming continue, and not cut the discussion off, you're going to find some innovative ideas that you had never considered before. And that really is the same in working together as a partnership. Let everyone speak and be heard and see what happens.
Dawn, I love what you said about WIOA having more flexibility and more gray, right? Because I think a lot of times workforce organizations might get scared, right? And they're like, well, we just want to read this in the most conservative way or look for the black and white. Can you think of an example or examples of successfully, places where maybe even in your own work where you've successfully been able to take advantage of that flexibility, that WIOA flexibility?
So the easy answer for me, and it's not technical on the program side, but it is within WIOA. The easy answer for me is one-stop operator. From WIA to WIOA, we heard about a one-stop operator. New concept, was not required before. And I've seen workforce boards around the country implement that position, if you will, exactly like they read it in the law. So it can be one that is prescriptive by the workforce board, one that is more administrative in nature. And I didn't read it that way. In Spokane, I'd created a model where the one-stop operator, their responsibilities were to be innovative, to lead partnership discussions like we had just talked about. They were given operational oversight over the entire one-stop center without other partners having sort of a final say. It was the person's job was to lead and be a true leader. So we were looking for somebody with a leadership background who, I didn't put it in the job description, but said it to the first one-stop operator we hired, you have to love all partners and all programs. So it was the first position in our history that was responsible for caring about everyone in the one-stop center, where most come, and it's okay, but come from a responsibility to their own agency. And we found that really challenging. So that was an easy one. Another one, not at the job seeker level, but was the MOU IFA. So it created an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, Infrastructure Funding Agreement, that was not exactly like it was described in law at all. And was told it was not possible and we couldn't share costs that way. And we couldn't use it to, in the leverage funding ways that we had. And that was not accurate. Actually, I had somebody call Department of Labor, this is true, within our system and tell them what I was doing because they thought that it was not going to be allowed. And Department of Labor published our MOU IFA on their website. There's a lot more flexibility than you think. And then lastly, integrated service delivery. For us, what that meant was we blended all funding together. I'm happy to help anyone after I describe this and you have questions, give me a call. But we created teams using human-centered design and customer feedback that met the needs of the customers. So we let them design our center. We said, hey, if we were going to start from scratch, what would you do? And their feedback was so obvious, yet it hadn't been really considered. So they said, I'm here for a resume, and you tell me about things like WIOA adult or dislocated worker. That makes no sense to me. Give me a resume team. So we had a team that focused on resumes. We had a team that focused on job search, things that made sense to the customer. And behind the scenes, we had to do, of course, all the management that was required of us, but it was not customer facing. I could go on, but those are three of my favorites.
That's great. Dawn, when I think about leadership, I know we have those in our audience that are either leaders or emerging leaders in workforce development. When I think about important skill sets, I think about the ability to respond to challenges and barriers that come up. And so my question for you is that with your experience across various roles, what are some of the biggest barriers or challenges that you've seen in bringing some innovative ideas into the workforce system? And how can leaders be more proactive to address that?
Fear of failure, number one. From the workforce board level, not challenging their boards enough. We see workforce board leaders who are, they live in the performance, right? And so they bring that to the boards. And so if you're bringing to your workforce boards performance data, and you are living and dying by Q2 employment rates, you're not making space for innovation. You're not making space for real leadership discussions. I really appreciate those boards that maybe they have a red, yellow, green chart, and they are only talking about performance if it's in the red and they're going to get funding cut or something like that. But other than that, they have created an environment for their board that knows you guys manage all of this WIOA stuff. Like, that is not the board's responsibility. Don't worry about that. Having the board and having the leaders focus on what's next, what is coming towards us. For example, AI. If boards are not having the discussion about how AI is going to impact them as a system and preparing for it, and I don't mean a one-time discussion, but there's folks out there who believe AI is going to have the largest impact and displacement of knowledge workers in United States history. If that is accurate, boards need to be talking about that, and how do they prepare one-stop center staff to serve knowledge workers who might not be able to get back into the knowledge worker space with the knowledge that they know because they've been replaced by AI. I can't imagine that there's too many AJCs out there who are truly ready to take on that challenge. I don't know if it's going to come, but we need to be prepared to think about those things. So there's just a lot of leadership. Leadership is required, thinking about the future of work and really challenging the status quo.
All right. So I'm a leader. I'm listening to this and I say, I would like to have a culture of innovation. What are a couple things that I can do as a leader to just, as you talked about, like the fear of failure and the barriers? Yeah. What can I do as a leader to start to create a culture of innovation? Yeah.
Doug and I were on a podcast one time. I'm laughing because Doug and I were on a podcast one time and he heard me say what I'm going to respond to with next. And he said, that's really uncomfortable. So I'm going to use it again and see if I can get the same look on his face. So one of the easiest and least expensive ways, free even, of developing that skill is when you're sitting in a room and you hear an idea that causes a visceral reaction within you, pause. Don't respond at all. So you have to give yourself, if you're timing yourself and you're giving yourself 45 seconds before you say anything, and you just sit there with your uncomfortableness. If you don't respond, you are making space for other ideas to come up. If you respond and you guide the discussion in a different direction, there is now the power dynamic in the room is to only say things that pleases you. And then all we're doing is reinforcing the same ideas that the leaders already had. And is that creating change? No, of course it's not. And is that driving innovation? Of course it's not. So I told Doug he had to, I think then I said you had to sit for 10 minutes or something with an idea you didn't like. And I think it was Doug who's like, no, like that, no one wants to do that. But it's a really easy way to make space and give space to new ideas. So there's a lot of different things you can do, but most importantly is shush. Like just don't guide the direction. The other is your response as a leader to things that don't go well. I worked with one organization and their leader responded to the smallest things. Like he was great at driving innovation. He really was. But he responded to the smallest things by pointing out that they were mistakes, right? A typo or something like that. They're huge. Don't get me wrong. No one wants to have that within their organization. But the downside is what happens is people then realize that if they make a mistake in any way, even come up with not a great idea, that it will be noticed, it'll be pointed out, others will see it. So your response to, I hate to say failure because it's not, your response to something that doesn't go perfectly actually drives the culture of innovation. So it's about making space and really thinking about how you talk about things that didn't go well, because both cause fear within staff, and fear makes people be quiet, and being quiet causes ideas to be reserved. And then you could even lose your best and brightest innovators without even knowing it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Dawn. Now, my final question, and you talked about AI as one area that is emerging innovatively within really the world, but also impact on workforce. But if you were to think of perhaps one innovation over the next 3 years that workforce development organizations could implement that would have a big impact, what would that be and why?
I have so many. One, skills-based hiring, and not because that's just what I'm working on that with Skills Forward, but we have economies all over the country where employers are truly struggling to find talent. And if you think to AI and how that could displace others, or any sort of recession, anything that causes people to be negatively impacted, a pandemic that you don't see coming. What we saw is employers are struggling so much to find talent that they are talking about skills-based hiring. And they want to know, how do I move away from the degree requirement into hiring based on past work? And I see some workforce boards across the country, Michigan, Ohio. We have other examples, Colorado, where workforce systems are focusing on that. And we have others that are saying, I really want to see if this, learning and employment record thing happens, or if HR systems figure out skills-based hiring. And for me, it is getting in there right now and helping to figure out what skills-based hiring looks like. So I don't know that it is in terms of an innovative tool. There's a lot out there and I can't promote one over the other just yet, but it is figuring out with employers and with local economies what skills-based hiring looks like. To me, that is first and foremost on the list.
Dawn, it is always a pleasure. I love that you're a force for pushing innovation forward in workforce. And I think our listeners, I know they're going to get a lot out of it. All right, let's give people, if they want to learn more, where should we send them?
Well, again, there's so many places. And I don't mean just to me, but if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Dawn Karber on LinkedIn, and I would be happy to point you in other directions and connect you with folks doing this work around the country. There's some amazing consultants. Jobs for the Future, JFF is doing some really cool stuff with communities of action. We have others across the country, service providers and others doing some great work. And I'd love to promote what they're doing. So reach out to me and I'm happy to point you in the right direction.
Dawn, again, thank you for your time today. You added a lot of great insights. Change is not easy. And so it takes a certain skill set and a way of looking at innovation and change to make that happen. You've done that. And you've also added a lot of great value and insights to our audience today. So thank you. Look forward to connecting with you again soon in the future. And look forward to having you on again sometime in the future as well.
Thank you both. That was fun.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.